welcome to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. If you are new here, welcome to my kitchen. Come to think of it, if you're not new here, welcome to my kitchen. It's a train wreck right now because we're dealing with a lot of things on the farm. We're waiting for some baby goats to give birth, and I am currently doing my fall and winter planting. And really though, if your kitchen isn't a mess, are you even living? So this video is actually part of a collaboration with Mennonite Farmhouse and a bunch of other creators called Souptember, and I am so excited because I love soup season. So people have asked me, Heather, what is soup season? You can have soups year round. Yes, you can. But when it is so oppressively hot out, I am just basically never in the mood for soups. But we are finally coming into fall. I think it's actually technically fall now. And the cooler weather is descending upon us this week. And I could not be more ready for soup season. So tonight I am going to be making it's like a butternut squash soup, but we have a squash here that we grow. One actually volunteered in my compost bin this year. It's called Tromboncino, and it looks like this. This is the Tromboncino squash. Now this one was harvested without the stem on it, and so this is what can happen if your stem cracks off. Your squash can start to go bad kind of fast. These normally last a good year in storage just as is, but you're going to lose some of your storage life if the stem is damaged like this. But this is not a problem. We can just cut this off and cook this up, and it's one of our kids' favorite meals, believe it or not. So let's get our life together for a little bit. So one of the ways that I really like to bulk up our soup meals is to have a crusty bread along with. And the bread that I like to make to have with our soups is called, there's a recipe for it online, I'll link it in the description box. It's called an artisan crunchy loaf or something like that. I don't normally like crunchy breads just as like a sandwich bread or anything, but to dip into soups, it is so lovely. And the process is actually really simple. It does take 3 hours to rise, so it's about 2:15 here right now. And so this is a good time for me to start the bread going. This is a yeast bread, so even if you don't have a sourdough starter or something going, you can get something that looks a lot like a sourdough loaf without having to babysit a sourdough starter. So we need 3 cups of bread flour. The recipe says 2 teaspoons of instant yeast. I have what's labeled as active dry yeast, and I'm sure that you bakers out there know the difference. I don't. I just know that both do work in this recipe. 2 teaspoons of salt. This is pink Himalayan. 1.5 cups, give or take, of very warm tap water. Now the recipe calls for tap water. You don't necessarily have to use tap water if that's something you don't want to use, but I think the recipe says it so that you don't really stress out about it if you don't have access to something other than tap. Now I am going to add this slowly because if I don't need to use all of this water, I won't. Got my Danish whisk here. Now this bread, this dough is supposed to be really loose and slouchy. So we're not gonna get a nice formed ball out of this. It's actually not what we want. This is technically a no knead recipe. This is too dry. This is a little too wet. I promise you this does not have to be an exact science. You can chill out with this recipe, it's really nice. One of the things that stressed me out a lot when I was first learning how to cook is I thought that you had to have everything just so. I mean, I'd go through a pretty simple recipe and it would take me ages to get through it because I was trying to be exact and precise. And I know that there's purists out there, especially in the baking world, that want things just so. I'm here to tell you that you really don't have to stress out about that. I mean, this is not a Michelin star restaurant here, right? So I've graduated to the rubber spatula, and I'm just kind of bringing all the dough down into the bowl so that it can all ferment together. And this is the proper consistency. It's a little bit soupy. It's definitely not a dough ball. This is good, and it's going to rise for 3 hours. I like to stick things in my microwave and use it like a proofing oven. I don't turn it on, but I just leave it in there to keep it away from the flying things that are on farms. A quick little note about this collaboration too. Collaborations are really fun. A lot of my viewers are familiar with how these kind of collaborations work. Usually there's a prize to be had for people that put genuine comments on the videos that are part of the collaboration. So there is a playlist down in the description box listing all all of the videos that are part of the collaboration. Today's the 27th, so we are one of the last ones. You do still have a few days to catch up. I believe it's October 3rd that Leanne over at Mennonite Farmhouse is going to go live. She's going to pick a random video and a random comment from one of the videos to win a $100 either Visa gift card or Amazon gift card. So that's pretty cool. So when you're done watching this video, make sure you go to that playlist, watch the other ones, make your comments, and then don't forget to check out the Mennonite Farmhouse channel on October 3rd. Alrighty, so it's a little bit later and I want to start the soup. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to cut off this funny end. It's completely fine on the inside. This is really just shriveled and hasn't exactly started to mold, but it probably wouldn't be long before it started to mold. And I do want to peel this before I go ahead and put it in my pot. And I don't use a vegetable peeler or anything. I just use my knife. I'll cut a section of squash off and then just kind of go around like so, getting the peel off. I'm gonna save this for the compost pile. You could feed it to your animals if you thought they would eat it. We have a lot of animals. We've got mostly goats, rabbits, and chickens, and I have found that not much will eat this part of the squash. A lot of things will eat like the inside, like the guts and seeds and whatever, but the peels very often go to the compost bin for us. You could save something like this to put in your broth. Now, if you're making something like bone broth that you want to be a little bit more savory, something like this is going to add a lot of sweetness, and that might not be what you're going for. I don't tend to add things like carrots or squash to my bone broth because of that, but if you like sweet things, you may prefer it. So all I'm aiming for here is about a 1-inch dice. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you needed this to cook faster, you may want to cut your pieces up a little bit smaller, but this is about the size that I'm going for. And we'll just go down the whole squash just like that. I'll show you when we get to this part. That's where the seeds are. I'm not sure how many of you watching this are gardeners or are aspiring gardeners, but sometimes squash can be a little bit tricky to grow. It really depends on where you are. We are in southwestern Kentucky, which I think technically is not considered the South, but we are extreme southwestern Kentucky, so I consider us the South. We definitely have the heat and the bugs to be considered the South, and that does include things like squash bugs and squash vine borers, and a lot of squash has been very hard for me to grow, but this tromboncino has been resistant to all of the bugs that we have, as well as the Dutch fork pie pumpkin. So if you are new to gardening or you've had a hard time growing squash, I would highly recommend both of those varieties. There. We got to the middle, or the seed part. If you have a whole bunch of tromboncino, you really don't have to mess with this bulb part, the bottom part. Sometimes it is more meaty than other times. This one looks pretty good, but a lot of times this is what you could feed to your animals and it still wouldn't go to waste if you didn't feel like messing with it. Now, this particular squash does have seed inside that is great for roasting. You can technically roast many squash seeds and it tastes exactly like roasted pumpkin seeds. Some seeds on some squash varieties are very hard. You roast them and you're gonna break a tooth trying to eat them, but these are very good. It's a lot like roasted pumpkin seeds as far as their density and texture. Of course, we could compost these as well, but I'm going to choose to feed this to my animals because we do have a couple animals that have been a little bit wormy, and pumpkin is a really great natural dewormer for your animals. Okay, now we've got our whole tromboncino in there. Eyeballing it, it's probably about 4 cups of cubed squash. I highly suggest using bone broth to simmer this in. You could use vegetable broth if that was your preference. I like to use bone broth because I feel like sometimes strictly vegetable soups can be lacking a little bit something. We like how full bone broth makes us feel, plus all the good, yummy nutrients. Okay. So what I've done here is just lightly cover them. I don't want to put all of the bone broth in here right now because I don't want this to be super soupy. I would like it to be a creamy soup. I'm just gonna put maybe about a tablespoon of this spice mix farm dust in here. Kind of like a seasonal. It's one of our favorite things. And then it's very, very good to put fresh thyme leaves in here if you have it. I don't even have dried thyme, but I do have this great substitute for it, summer savory. Smells lovely. Maybe about a teaspoon of that. And before I serve this, I will give this a taste test and we can add anything else that we may like. Now I'm gonna bring this up to a boil. I don't have any patience, so I usually will put things on high. And then as soon as it boils, I'm gonna turn it down to a simmer. We're gonna simmer it for about 45 minutes to an hour. The goal is to get the squash pieces to be fork tender, a lot like you would like roasted potatoes or something. And for reference, it's been almost 2 hours since we put our bread in, and it has done a lot of rising. We could probably shape and bake the loaf now, but I think I'm gonna give it a little bit longer. All right, so it's time to get our bread ready, and it is a very, very sticky dough, so highly advise that you lay down a good bit of flour. Ooh. This one might have overproofed. That will be all right. All right, so I did let it sit in there probably a little bit longer than it really needed to, and it got quite fluffy, but it will work out. We just might need a little bit extra flour to get it to shape. So again, this is a no-knead recipe. We're just gonna do a little bit of folding just to get it into the shape that we want. All right, that's not too bad. We didn't need a whole bunch of extra flour. So I just folded it in on itself a couple times, and my seam for my bread is on the top. I'm just gonna flip it over and kind of use the flour on the table and tuck the sides in a little to create a circle. Now I've got my oven preheating to 450 degrees. There's a Dutch oven in there while it's preheating with its lid. You want to make sure that your Dutch oven's lid and the handle on it can handle 450 degrees. Mine does. I have this really cool silicone mat for transferring bread. You can also use parchment. Set that down there. This is going to help us pick it up. Okay, here's my preheated Dutch oven. Set the bread down in and fold these tabs down. Now this is going to bake in the 450 degree oven for 30 minutes with the lid on, and then after that first 30 minutes we'll take the lid off and bake it for an additional 12 minutes. Meanwhile, this is what our soup is doing. I am going to tilt the lid a little bit just to allow some of the steam to escape, to kind of concentrate the broth down a little bit so we get a creamier soup. Now, one thing that can make or break a soup is a great garnish. I think garnishes are very underappreciated in the soup world. I love them. It's one of the reasons that I really like to grow sprouts and microgreens over the fall and winter, because those go really great on everything, but especially things like soups. But also cooked bacon is so good on many soups, and shredded cheese. Now, as you could tell, we just got this bacon out of the freezer, and it's actually easiest to cut bacon into small pieces while it's frozen. This is bacon that we got from the Coonies that we had processed about a year ago now, and we've been rationing it because we didn't get a whole lot, but we really did get more than I expected, to be honest. If you were my cheese later, where would you be?
Probably still outside the killing wasp.
Oh, you had my cheese later killing wasps in the shed?
I think I set it on the water container. The rain sensor.
Really? Okay. Can I have it?
Yeah. And try it.
Okay, thanks.
Gotta get the bug guts off of it.
Was it an effective wasp killer?
Very.
That's a good tool. It's done a lot for us here. So here's our bacon pieces, cooked well done, and with cooties especially, there's a lot of fat. I am gonna save this, but I'm gonna let this cool down a little bit. Can you show us the new tool you got? Careful. That's gonna work better than my cheese ladle, right?
Yes, much.
So it has definitely been an ample amount of time for my squash to be cooked. It's now 5:45 and I've let a lot of the broth concentrate because I did tilt the lid of my pot here, and I'm just going to use this immersion blender to blend everything together. If you do not have something like this, you can blend it in a regular blender or in like a food processor. I would be very careful because this is very hot. Woo! You see how it's thickening up as we're blitzing this? Can you see how lovely and thick this is without any added thickeners? Look at that. That's awesome. Don't forget to give it a taste and season additionally as needed. Really hot. Very good. It just needs a tiny bit of something. I'm gonna guess that it's garlic. We could have easily added garlic into the pot while this was simmering, or added some garlic into the oven while the bread is cooking to roast it. I didn't do that, so I've got this granulated garlic here. It's not as awesome as something like roasted garlic, but it will do. Tiny bit more salt, pepper. She's been asking for tromboncino soup. Look at it. Oh, it's lovely. That's without...
like roasted garlic.
Well, I did put garlic in it.
Smells good.
Good.
It's just very hot.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm saving mine. A piece of bacon.
That bacon, too, it adds just the right amount of smokiness and the savory that a sweet squash like that really needs.
Bacon makes everything better.
Bacon does make everything better.
Okay, what matters?
Our lovely crusty bread.
Yes.
So now since we've tasted it,
That's steamy and lovely.
it's on fire. Yeah, my eyes are watering.
Just because you're so cute, we'll decide to walk, okay? Hey, boys. Let me put it in your bowl, okay? Thanks so much for joining me for dinner. I hope that you enjoy the tromboncino soup. You can make that with any similar type squash like a butternut or even a pumpkin. And don't forget to check out the playlist for the Soup-tember collaboration and make sure you get your genuine comments in before October 3rd.